President Marcos commends the House of Representatives for their, quote, good work as they continue to tackle and pass priority legislation of his administration.
I would like to thank you and to congratulate you on the good work that has been done, and I look forward to seeing more of these outcomes from the lower house as we discuss the important issues on the economy, on public health, and job creation, climate change, all the different problems that you and I both face.
President Bongbong Marcos assures the public that the government has no intention of using state pension funds as seed money for the Maharlika Investment Fund.
We will not use it as a seed fund. However, if a pension fund, which is what pension funds do, is they invest. If the pension fund decides that the Maharlika Fund is a good investment, it's up to them if they want to invest in it.
Ang pondo niyan ay galing sa gobyerno, galing sa iba't ibang ahensya ng gobyerno. Therefore, kapag yan ay nagkaroon ng irresponsible use of loan proceeds, the contingent liabilities of the national government will increase.
Yeah, it's really, number one is governance. Kasi this involves a lot of money. You're talking about billions of pesos of funds. No? So, all the more na the responsibility fiscally increases.
One concern about the recently passed Maharlika Investment Fund bill was that it was rushed and that lawmakers just did not have enough time to scrutinize and flesh it out. But it is done. The question now is, so what now? How can government allay fears of possible corruption and losses as the MIF comes to force? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to the Monday edition of The Chiefs. I'm Ed Lingao. With me tonight in the studio, Ana Marie Pamintuan, the editor-in-chief of the Philippine Star, and possibly joining us later in the show will be Robbie Lampay of One News. Ami, magandang
gabi.
Magandang gabi. Magandang Lunes.
Magandang Lunes. Happy Monday.
Oh, parang mas
Happy ka na ba? Happy ka na ba? Nalinawan na ba sa'yo kung ano yung Maharlika?
Medyo marami pa tayong kailangan pag-usapan dun sa bagay-bagay na yun. Well, mukhang kahit yung mga legislator hindi nila alam kung gusto nila talaga mangyari until the end ang laki ng kaibahan ng unang sinampang panukala sa Kongreso noong Nobyembre 2022 versus yung lumabas the Senate version and then the BICAM version that was basically an adoption of the Senate version.
Pati nga yata parang si President Marcos hindi nakita yung isang provision in the BICAM version, no? Na hindi kasama ang ating pension funds.
Absolute prohibition
Exactly.
in the participation of pension funds including SSS, GSIS, pati OWA, PIWAW funds,
Yes.
and Pag-ibig doon sa
Nag-expand siya,
Maharlika.
actually,
That's in
no?
Article 6 and 12 specifically in the Maharlika.
Not even voluntary.
Not even voluntary. Pero ang sabi ng Pangulo, was it on Wednesday?
Ayun na nga
Kung gusto nila, pwede pa rin.
well, he still has to sign the measure, no?
Yeah.
Ibibito ba niya yan?
Actually, that's the other question That's the other question. Was there miscommunication along the line or
no communication?
Or no communication? Or is it also possible, I'm just saying, is it possible na the President has something else in mind, possibly a line veto? I'm just raising possibilities. I'm not saying that's the case.
Yun na nga ang pinag-uusapan ngayon. So, siguro ipasok na natin yung ating...
So for tonight, we are fortunate to have with us somebody who has a lot of experience, dealing with these kinds of funds. We will hear from an international investment banker right after this break. Let's see right back. And thank you for staying with the Chiefs, joining our conversation this evening. Global investment banker Stephen Kunyeng. Sir, magandang gabi and welcome to the Chiefs in person.
In person.
Thank you for inviting me again, and I'm honored to meet all of you in person. Good evening.
Kasama natin si Robbie Lampay, One News.
Maraming salamat pa.
Sir, let me back up a bit kasi in the past, when we've been zooming you, you made a very good point. Ano ba talaga itong Maharlika? Is it a sovereign wealth fund or is it a national development fund? Now you have a copy. The BICAM report approved and gumugulong na yan. What do you see? What is it exactly?
I see, if you read the declaration of policy, it's a sovereign wealth fund.
Oh, it's still a
I
sovereign
mean, sorry, I
fund?
mean a development fund. But if you read the other provisions, it could be a sovereign wealth
It
fund.
could be.
It could be a general fund, because you have to read things together. You look at the Section 2 policy, economy, Philippines infrastructure.
Yes.
You read Section 14, cash, foreign currencies, metals, tradable commodities, fixed income instruments issued by sovereigns, quasi-sovereigns, and supranationals, domestic and foreign corporate bonds, listed or unlisted securities, doesn't say where, Islamic investments, co-investments, mergers, even other funds. That's
Which
a
is
sovereign
everything.
wealth fund. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't wish to cast aspersions when I don't know the facts, but I think that's maybe what happens when you rush.
Okay, but maybe draw a simpler line for me. I mean, pasensya na, parang I think I'm getting some of it and much of it, but draw a simpler line for us. What makes it different in terms of mandate, in terms of our expectations of it, in terms of the risk? What makes a development fund suddenly crossing this line? It's actually a sovereign
Okay,
wealth fund.
it's where you put the money. If you're only putting it in new investments in your home country, based on the criteria, then it is a national development fund. If I can put it in whatever I want, wherever I want, it's a regular fund. And now, if it happens to be owned by the government, then it's a sovereign fund.
Yes.
So, if you look at where they can put the money, it's a sovereign fund. If you look at the purpose, it's a national development fund.
Sir, so what does this mean to
yes.
us? Yeah.
Anong problema
Okay.
doon? What's the problem in that kind of
here is,
situation?
and please be a little patient because I want to put the context.
Yes.
There are three ways you do a fund. If you have a fund that's in bonds or public equities, let's say the fund is $1 billion. You give them $1 billion and right away they invest it in public equities and bonds, and then if they want to change their position, they sell some and they buy others. The other way is what's normally done in a private equity fund that goes for unlisted companies, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's mergers and acquisition, whatever. Normally, how do you fund that fund? Let me give you a very simple example. Let's say I'm a private equity firm, a global firm. I have a buyout fund. Let's say it's a $10 billion fund. I go and get limited partners, pension funds, individuals, wealthy people, corporations, university endowments to join my fund. So let's say I put in 100 million. Let's say I'm Harvard University. I put 100 million into this private equity fund. It's 10 billion. I'm committing to 1% of the fund. Then that's it. What happens is, let's assume that fund says, I now found a $10 billion investment. I'm going to buy this company. So that's 10% of the 10 billion, 1 billion for 10 billion. Now I go to everybody and say, ipondo mo yung 10%. So my 100 million commitment of, let's say I was a university endowment, now I'll send 10 million. So they don't hold the money until they need the money. Dito, sinasabi, maglagay ka na ng 75 billion pesos
Bahala
kaagad.
na kami.
Pero wala pang gamit.
Yes.
Now, let's say, oh, we need it for organizational expenses, everything. The funds say, if I need money for organization, sige, tatawag muna ako ng 5%. But hindi yung tatawag ako ng
Yung investment na
exactly
mismo.
kung wala pang gamit. So what's going to happen to me is with the 75 billion that's coming in, they can put it in anything in the meantime.
Yes.
So that's why I'm saying, I think, now I'm not saying they will put it in a good thing or a bad thing or a great thing, but ideally they should put it in
You would
something
know.
short term so that if the investment comes in, may pondo na. But they have full discretion on what to do based on Section 14 while they're waiting for what to invest
Okay.
under Section 2.
They have full discretion on what to do. Another key question
Now, what
is,
to do with the money
Exactly.
that's put in first.
Okay.
Now, but they don't have
but
full
that's my
discretion
question.
on the long-term investments.
Okay, but that's my question. Whether it's long term or short term, do we get the sense that they do know what to do
I don't
with
know.
this money?
Well, here's the issue I said the last time. The whole problem is we have a big policy, which is this. We don't have clear guidelines. And in fairness, the guidelines will not come from the law.
Yes.
The guidelines will come from the management and the board. And right now, we have no idea who the managers will be. We have no idea who will be the independent directors. The only people we know will be the ex officio directors. The head of DBP, the head of Land Bank, the Secretary of Finance. So who will be the independent? What is the direction they will enunciate? Like, for example, the board can just say, so that there's, and I hope they say it, so that there's no abuse of Section 14, we're just going to put it in short-term money market instruments until we find the investments. Now, what if they start buying stocks anywhere? And what if the stocks go down? Then what happens?
We can actually buy outside, right? Based on
Anything.
this. Yes.
Okay, what foreign currencies, fixed income
Yes.
instruments issued by sovereigns. If they wanted it to be in the Philippine bonds, they would have said Philippine bonds.
bonds.
Quasi-sovereigns, supranationals. What the supranationals means? The World Bank, IFC. Now, but not satisfied with that, domestic and foreign corporate bonds. In other words,
No, so
anything.
it's explicitly
Anything.
different. huh?
Listed or unlisted equities, whether common, preferred, or hybrids. Doesn't say where. Anything. Listed, unlisted. So basically they're saying, with the 75 billion we're giving you, bahala ka. Now, and the money coming after. Now, I would suggest when the board is organized and the management is organized, they adopt as their policy or guidelines how they will put the money,
The money.
pending the long-term investments. Because they're going to be sitting at a minimum on 75 billion pesos.
Yes, and bringing in additional investments, you mentioned to us in a previous interview, of course, the investments will want to know kahit ballpark
between
figure
you- okay.
of the return on
All right.
investment,
All right, hold on. Again, thank you for sending this to me ahead of time so I could read it. If you look at who else is going to put in money, it's basically Land Bank, DBP, BSP, government through privatization process, PAGCOR, and that's it.
That's it, yes.
There's no outside investors coming in.
No, but
Where
they're
is it?
going to invite nga.
Yeah, but when they
Legal-
call it,
Where?
actually, yun yung
Where?
sinatanong ko eh. Parang
Where?
they're calling it officially
wala
an
dyan.
investment, an investment
Ah, okay.
fund, di ba? I was gonna ask actually, are we still
will
splitting
invest?
hairs between a development fund and an investment fund?
Okay.
And to that point, what exactly, we talked about
Okay,
sovereign wealth fund, development
okay,
fund.
what I'm going to say,
What are
based
the
on other
expectations?
investments outside of what's listed, I don't see a vision
not
that,
in the law.
I don't see any vision that says and other people. It doesn't say. Now, it
But
does,
will that exclude them kung sakasakali?
well, okay, the only one that's prohibited are the pension funds that
Yes.
forever
Yeah.
and ever.
Expressly,
Okay,
yes.
yeah. Now, so if again, it's left to the management and the board. If they want to say later, we will invite you. There's nothing to prohibit it, but there's nothing that says you must invite somebody. See, because the difference with Indonesia, which I like very much, which when we talked the last time I said was a good model, was why, and let's just be blunt, Indonesia has issues that many other countries like us have, okay? But why are people not worried about that fund in Indonesia? And they're not raising the questions we are raising and other people are raising. Because the Indonesian government is only a minority of the funding and a minority of the board, and the management is independent. So the government cannot literally force its way. It is the largest single investor, but it is not the controlling investor. So to do that, they had to write it carefully so that multilateral institutions and international funds would be willing to come in. And it is done in the normal way. They are only going to send the money when the investments are made, not advance fund like here. And because, let's be blunt, if you sent an invitation to, let's say, let's use the biggest investor in funds, CalPERS, California Pension Retirement System. They'll say, what's your policy? Who's your management? They'll say, hilaw pa.
So, sir, let me take a different tack. You're looking at 75 billion that they could possibly be sitting on while they're scouting around for investment opportunities.
Yes.
Is there any danger there? Is there any bigger danger there of that money in the meantime being misused or going somewhere else?
Well, I don't want to, again, cast aspersions on people. That is where it's up now. Based the way it's written, it's up to the board and it's up to the management because they will have 75 billion and under Article 14, they can, Section 14, they can put it in anything they want, pending putting it in the permanent things. So the answer is, I don't know.
Yeah, but is it too much leeway, in other words, in the meantime that...
I wouldn't have put it that way.
Well, the way they framed it, you have to sell this to the public, right?
Well, okay,
They're saying we have this 13 trillion approaching 14 trillion debt, and we need money to finance the infrastructure projects. And that's actually the idea. We're going to generate jobs by building infrastructure, and it will be financed partly through this. So
Yes,
what do you think of that? That's the way they're framing it.
That's fine. But the point is, even in the last show I told you, I am in favor of a national development fund, properly run, properly managed, properly set up. This has the possibility of being that. The problem, I think, and it's not a problem that cannot be solved, by the way, so I'm not saying this is change it. It's a lot of responsibility now that the law has been passed, and I assume will be signed shortly, is incumbent now on the board, but more important, the managers. If they do a good job, all these things will be forgotten. They'll see they're making good investments. Over time, it's making a return, and the capital stock and infrastructure of the country improves. But that's within their discretion because allowable investments, subject to strict compliance with investment and risk management guidelines, the board of directors may engage in the following. In other words, bahala ka.
But to that point, assuming that you have a good board to start, as ideal as you can imagine it, is there anything here that guarantees the institutionalization of those best practices? Or is this, how stable is that going to be?
At the end of the day, it is the quality of the managers and the quality of the board. Because as I've said, you hire, and never mind an honest but incompetent manager. He can follow the guidelines, but he'll make stupid investment decisions and you lose money. You get a corrupt manager, you can put all the guidelines, because look, I think we have enough anti-corruption laws in this country. It's enforcement, right? Yes. We don't need new laws. We need enforcement, and we need the right people. So my point is, if you have a corrupt manager, even all the guidelines will not stop that guy from finding a way, okay? Do you think one MBD was written, by the way, we're going to do this and do that under the table? Of course not. It was written like a proper law. So what do? You make things difficult to abuse. How did Indonesia do it? They said by not being under government control. Simple. The outside pension funds, who are a majority, can basically stop any investment. So in other words, even if the government wants it, unless they can convince the rest of the board to approve it, tapos. How do other people, like let's say Singapore or Norway, do it? They pay the fund managers like the way private sector fund managers are paid. So let's assume I'm a good fund manager. Let's assume, okay, how does a private equity firm work? 20% of the profit beyond the hurdle rate goes to the firm. Okay? Let's assume I make $2 billion profit. 400 million of that goes to the fund managers in a normal private equity firm.
Yes.
Let's assume over 5 years I'm going to make $10 million as a private fund manager. Mandadaya pa ako. I'm being paid very well, and I'm being paid for performance. So if I do well, I'll be paid well. Why will you cheat? Now, there's still mistakes made and everything. Like it's in the headlines today that Temasek is cutting the pay of its key executives because they made a bad bet in that.
Last year.
Now, that's different from what we said last time when I was talking about mark to market. This is a real loss. They put in 275 million and wrote off 275 million. It's not ganito yung presyo. No, it's now worth zero. The 275 million you put in, it's a write-off. Now, so even well-meaning and expert managers will make mistakes. We're not God, all right? Any fund manager. So the key is, this is where it's now been given to the board to set the guidelines and limitations within Section 14. So if I was the board, I could say, to avoid any doubt, no insider trader, no front running, no nothing, until we have the investments, it will be in short-term liquid debt instruments. Period. Then wala nang insider trading, wala nang corruption. Then, as we find the infrastructure investments to invest in, we can liquefy it and we can put all that 75 billion to work. But in the meantime, let's assume, just for the sake of argument, we bought a really good company, Microsoft, a year ago, because listed or unlisted equities. If we bought it 2 years ago, we're down 30%. Not because Microsoft is bad, it's just stock market valuations went down. So that's why most private equity firms do not call the money until they need it. Now, in this case, they want the money upfront, some of it, and then the rest. It's not clear whether as it comes you get it or it's called. It's why I said maybe if they weren't rushing so much, they might have reconciled that or tightened that provision a bit. But having said that, let me say something positive. The Senate version improved on the Congress, and the final version improved on the Senate. So I'm glad it got better. I'm glad it got more focused. However, there are certain things, any law cannot cover everything. Part of it has to be the rules, the practice, and the procedures adopted, and the quality of the management. I'm a little disheartened that from the very beginning, we've not concentrated on the management. They just have common provisions like it has to be qualified. Kung MBA lang ang kailangan, ilang milyon ang MBA na Pilipino lang. Okay? And then you're just saying, somebody who's not been criminally found...
In the last 5 years.
Even if 100 years ago I was committing financial fraud, should you hire me? I don't care what the time period is, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 50 years. You shouldn't hire someone, period, guilty of financial fraud.
There is another lingering concern about the impact on the Bangko Sentral. Did the law address those concerns, particularly on the capitalization?
Okay. I will be... They made it less bad.
That's not good.
Exactly, because I would, if you look at even just recently, since our last chat, Silicon Valley Bank, First Republic, Credit Suisse, in each case, the central bank in Switzerland, the Federal Reserve, had to basically pump money.
Yes.
All right? Now, and in the Federal Reserve, what did they do? They basically said, so that someone will buy these banks, they basically had a lot of fully fine government securities. You could now discount 100% of the value of that bond to get liquidity upfront. And that's why they were able to sell it and find the cert. Now, but that was like $100 billion plus that they did just for those two banks, okay? Now, so the theory is your central bank can never be big enough. Now, if you read the provision on the central bank, it's good enough to say, besides giving 100% of their dividends, in other words, the balance sheet of the bank and the firepower will not grow. But it says, provided the monetary board may recommend to the president, kitang-kita nagmamadali sila, they didn't even capitalize monetary and board. Because it is the monetary board, okay? So it will be reduction as warranted. You need that money in an emergency.
Yes.
The emergency does not pre-announce itself. So what happens is when the time you come, you didn't build up the pondo. It's just like insurance. You don't get insurance after your house burns.
Yes.
So if you're building up your insurance fund, you're basically saying 100%. Because what is the BSP law require? 100% of the profits go to the government, and the government puts it back to add capital. So we're not adding capital for a while. I don't think that's very prudent. Now, again, the Senate improved it by saying the Monetary Board can recommend to the President the reduction of the contribution. In other words, it's not for the Monetary Board to decide. It's for the Monetary Board to tell the President, sige na.
Okay. Mr. Gonying, obviously we have a lot more questions. We will just need to take a break. Please stay with us, the Chiefs. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Chiefs. We're still talking about the Maharlika Investment Fund with our guest tonight, international investment banker Stephen Kooning. Before the break, we were discussing the impact on the Bangko Sentral. And you know, this is monetary, no? It depends a lot on confidence. How will this impact on the perception of our financial standing, siguro, in the international community?
I don't want to overstate what generally, I said on another show, when somebody said, how do foreign investors view the Philippines? And I said, nobody cares. We're a rounding error. Okay? Even within Asia, we're one of the smaller stock markets. We're one of the smaller
Rounding
economies.
error.
I mean, I'll tell you the truth. We're rounding error. All right? I mean, even Asia Pacific ex China and Japan funds, we're like 5%. Okay? So talagang rounding error. Now, so the truth is, how the foreign investors view this, they don't. They're not thinking about it. There's nothing to think about.
What about
Why?
after
Because
this
they're
passage?
why? Because they're still waiting for
There's
something,
nothing
or
yet. Okay, we're even if it's a $1.5 billion fund, that's still a rounding error, as I told you the last time.
It's very...
If you go to the 30, you have to go to 37 global fund managers, but you go below $1 trillion in assets under management.
Oh dear.
You have to get to number 38.
Dollars yun,
Yeah, US
remember.
dollars, before you get below 1 trillion. So even a 10 billion fund is a rounding error.
Okay. Sige.
Okay.
I think
That's not a rounding error
sige,
to
well,
us,
I think that's
but it's a rounding error to the global
that's
community.
Very clear. That's very
Okay.
clear. But obviously, it's a big deal for us.
To us, it is.
But let's put it this way. Assuming everything is in place, the IRR is in place, we know who the board is, and so on that day, that we know exactly what kind of an animal this is, what the plans are, who's going to manage this, and so on, what are the immediate indicators that we look at to give us a sense, whether abroad or right here at home, that will give us a sense that, okay, looks like this is going to work, looks like this is going to be received
I'll tell you
positively.
honestly, because there are no outside investors, nothing. Because let's assume you hire Warren Buffett of the Philippines to become the fund manager, and you hire Jamie Dimon of the Philippines to be the chairman of the, or at least the lead independent director. They still haven't made any investments. So what will be the indicator is when the investments are marked to market, and it's the quality of the investments. Now, if they start with lousy managers and lousy independent directors, people will just say, good luck. If you start with good ones, then they'll say, okay, let's see. But in the end, it is what investments they will make. And if it's a good investment, they will see the returns mark to market every year. And then people will get more happy. But right now, this fund, maybe the president was reading an earlier statement, there's no provision for outside investors. So as far as they're concerned, foreign investors, it's very unfortunate and poor if you lose money. It's very fortunate and good if you make money, but it's not enough to move the needle. Now, domestically, yeah, it's good or bad. It means something, but yes. But there's no indicator The day they hire the managers, the day they put the board, the day they set up the office, it's still a work in progress with no work progressed yet.
There is another lingering concern. No? I don't know if all the fears were addressed by the BICAM bill, that it might turn out to be another one Malaysia Development Berhad Fund.
I can tell you, you can have the tightest provisions.
Yes.
It can always happen. And with the loosest provisions, but the right people and the right board, it will not happen. In the end, that's why even in the last show I said, I wish there was more concentration on who the managers will be and who the independent directors will be, apart from the ex officio. Because you go to the financial press globally, you see advertisements to get, why don't you put your money into this fund? Why don't you put your money into this pension manager? What are they selling? They're selling the quality of their managers and they're selling their historical track record for similarly situated funds. Like, why does Fidelity have trillions of dollars? Because they've been returning trillions of dollars.
Yes.
Why will a startup have a hard time with a new fund? Because they said, what does a new fund do? They start with old fund managers. Because the new fund has no track record. So they hire someone with a track record to say, trust this guy. Galing siya dyan, kumita siya dyan, kikita siya uli. But you cannot have a new fund and new managers. Because when you're trying to get outside money, you want them to be confident. If either you have a fund that has a long track record, let's say like Fidelity, Capital Research, Putnam, all these global names, you only secondarily look at the fund manager because you just know the firm will not hire stupid people. And if they make a mistake, they will fire them. The newer funds say, we hire a star so that you're willing to give us the benefit of the doubt because that star made money for you in the past. So we're waiting to see.
Yeah, and while we're waiting for all of that, including the benefit of the doubt, just to get to that stage, what are the implications for us as Filipinos? Yesterday, former BSP Deputy Governor Diwa Gonigundo was saying, oh, watch out for the costs here. It's going to mean higher taxes. It's going to mean more borrowing. You agree?
No. I think that is a more like a catastrophe scenario, which could happen. So I'm not saying he's wrong, but I'm saying I think that's alarmist. I try not to be partisan towards, like, a lot of times if you listen to people who are anti-Maharlika, they're all of the yellow crowd. You look at the people who are pro-Maharlika, they're all administration crowd. I'd rather just look at the facts. Look, have I said anything about anybody? No. I've talked about provisions, I talked about practice policy. So I don't want to be alarmist or self-congratulatory. I'm just saying, here's what we should look for. In fairness, no law can capture or prevent anything. If all you need is law, we should have no more murders, no? Because murders are illegal. But murders still happen. So the point is, are there appropriate penalties to do it? And is the social framework the type that will discourage that or minimize it? So the same thing, and I go back, in a fund, the most important thing are the fund managers. Now, you compensate them well, you have the correct governance, the good people will, on balance, do a good job because they'll have no incentive to cheat.
Pero sir, on that point, from what you see there, are they compensated well enough for us to be able to get in the good managers? Because for example...
They could, because here's something, okay? If you look at the payments, it says, and it's, they can be paid in line with private sector pay.
That's a lot.
Yes, I told you, the richest fund manager last year was paid $1.1 billion.
Yes, that's a lot.
Nah, nobody's going to pay $1 billion to the manager. Because first of all, the fund is not big enough to do that. Because he was paid a percentage of
But
what the
still
profit.
a lot.
But my point, okay,
Considering-
let me say so that the people get used to what is expected normally. In a normal private equity firm, name anybody. KKR, CVC, Carlyle, anybody, okay? The standard provision is you can charge up to 2% management fee and 20% profit carry. So let's assume I had a $10 billion fund and I doubled my money. So I gave back 20 billion. I'm not giving back 10. I'm giving back 6. Because I'm giving back 8. Because of the 10 billion profit, I am entitled to 20%.
Wow.
But if I don't make any money, I don't get it. But you know that going in. Now, not everybody pays that. As they like to say, there's the wholesale price and the retail price. The 20% is the retail price. Like, let's say I'm a $10 billion fund and I put in 20 billion. Sabi ko, hoy, diskwento dyan, ha? Sa carry and sa management fee, because I'm already taking care of 20% of the entire fund. So there are things like that, okay? So, but it's just like when you buy an airplane, A350. There's the list price, and there's buying 10 airplanes, bigla, it's 40% cheaper. So they're also, but the,
Parang sa Divisoria,
yeah, yeah, but there may tawad. But the official practice is up to 2% management fee and up to 20% carry. So let's assume we just start with 75 billion pesos. Let's say $1.5 billion. Let's say they double their money over 5 years. That's $300 million carry. If they paid things privately. That goes to the fund manager. But instead of saying, wow, ang dami nilang kikitain, we should say, wow, they made 1.2 billion profit for the country on 1.5 billion equity. What are you complaining? Yung 1.5, naging 2.7.
But you do know that there will be people who will be complaining. You don't, I mean, knowing how things work in the
That's
Philippines.
why
we get your point, di ba? We get your point. Look,
Okay, I would just
pinakita to,
say-
nagtrabaho to for us. Pinakita tayo. So may porsyento sila, yun ang usapan.
Yeah.
But people are gonna get sticker shock, di ba?
Okay. Why do people get jealous of investment bankers? Because they say we're paid well. Yes, we are. Okay, I'm not complaining. Why did I retire already? Because I saved my money. Okay,
Yes.
but my point is.
Yeah, but you're private. This is a public fund,
I
and that's
agree.
gonna be.
That's why maybe they should say, look, they put a policy. How you implement? Okay, here's the other problem. You pay them too little. If you're a gun fund manager, why would I bother? All right, I mean, let's be blunt. If I went to KKR or I went to CVC or I went to Carlyle or Lazard and I was told the management team plus the firm will get 20% of the carry, 20% carry, and that's for us. Why will you come here and
No. Just be clear. We get it, diba? But how will a private person coming in from the private sector come in? Never signed up to be a public official. Never signed up to be but the reality is it is a public fund, and there will be people carping about that. I mean, on a personal level and on a social level, do you think that the private fund manager is going to be primed to receive a level of
Hate.
scrutiny that a private person like you really, diba? We may be jealous. We're genuinely jealous, but you're spared from that kind of scrutiny.
Yeah, I keep quiet. I don't say how much I earn and everything.
Sasabihin sir, para sa bayan na lang yan.
Iba to di ba? Parang
In fact, that's what they're saying now. Sinasabi nila, and nag-i-invest ng DBP, di ba?
Okay.
Why do we have to pay another layer
Here's
of management?
Here's my dilemma.
Yes.
That is why I said you need to prepare the people. Like,
Yes,
what did I say?
exactly.
Prepare the people for actual losses. Prepare the people. Okay, for example, how in the early days did Temasek and GIC do it? When they started doing this type of things, they put the funds in other funds. In other words, GIC initially and Temasek initially didn't say, magtatayo ka ng private equity diretso. They said, when we're starting to go outside the country, let us put it with the private
Somewhere
equity fund. No, that we became a limited partner in other people's funds.
Sila yung responsible.
Yes, and so then
Okay.
so at least we're not paying our people 20% carry.
Yes.
We're paying them good market rates, nice sweldo, but we're not paying them $300 million if there's a windfall. But the funds got $300 million if there was a windfall with what they did. Then later, as they got better, and people got used to it, then they said, we'll do that directly also. Now, do they pay their fund managers the way the private sector pays? No. But they pay them very well. They get 7-digit packages in US dollars for performance, okay?
Like Singapore, huh?
Yeah,
The
exactly. I was
highest paid
gonna-
government
Yeah, exactly.
officials
The
in
Prime
world.
Minister gets $2
Not
million.
only that, I
No,
mean,
but
this
let me think
Yeah.
So what do these fund managers do? So if you're saying, kung magaling ka, bakit ka pupunta sa Temasek and GIC if you can get more
Yes.
outside? What do? They make their name in Temasek and GIC, and then they set up their own fund after. Because they said, at least kung papasok ko ka sa Temasek, even though in GIC, I do a good job, I'll still get paid well. Maybe not as well if I had my own fund or spec. Then after like 5-10 years, they'll
just you
say,
wait.
I have, like the guy I did my 3 GIC deals with, who was their head of private equity of Southeast Asia, left and set up his own. And even and GIC said, I'll give you some money to set up your own. And now he's getting the 2 and 20 for himself.
What about the criticism naman that the BSP should not be in the business of turning a profit? Investing
the
for profit.
BIC,
BSP.
the BSP makes money as part of what it does, not as the main purpose. The main purpose of the of BSP is financial stability and managing our currency. I agree.
It's not supposed to make money.
If it was up, okay.
It's not their business to turn
If
profit.
they make money, that's good.
Yes.
But the primary thing is defending the currency and the economy.
Yes.
All right? Now, if it was up to me, would I have the BSP put in money? No. But that's my opinion. I'm not president. I'm not the Senate. But
Well, they actually told the Senate, the BSP officials told them, it will set back their capitalization program
it will.
by several years, up
It will.
to 17 years.
let me
What's the
bring-
impact of that on our financial stability?
The impact is we better not have a crisis because if everything is fine and stable and within bounds, we'll be fine. If we have another 1997 or 2008, will we have okay, in a huge global crisis or even a local crisis, like let's say, I'm old enough, I'm 64, okay? I know what 1983 to 86 was like when the peso went from 7 to 21, okay, in 2 years. Now, you can either have a local homegrown crisis, you can have a regional crisis like 97, or you can have a crisis in 2008. Every time you're going to have not enough money. But the less deficit there is, the better it will be. And that's why the primary idea of the BSP is keep making it bigger and bigger because you never know how much you need. It is basically saying, do you want to fully insure your house or partly insure your house kung may sunog? Kung maliit lang sunog, okay lang. Then you co-pay 50%. What if the whole house burns down? Now, I would have preferred the same logic for not having the pension funds would equally apply to the BSP. But, I mean, I don't want to be alarmist and say, therefore it's catastrophic. It's not. If I was the decision maker, I wouldn't ask the BSP to put in money. But I don't want to also say, therefore it's evil. It's not. But it would be my preference not to have it.
Sir, you made a point kanina na, and in previous shows that Indonesia has a good model, and I think among the reasons for that you cited was government is not the biggest
Yes.
stakeholder there. Is there any way you can cure this?
No. It's not written that way. Okay, let's just start with the board. Who is in the board?
Finance.
You have
The finance chief is the chair.
1, 2, 3.
Ex-officio chair,
Of the 7 directors, only 3 are outside.
the independent director.
Yeah, so
Yes.
therefore,
Then 2 regular directors.
already for sure, the majority are people in the government.
Government. Yeah.
Whichever government it is, because this hopefully will last a long time and do well. Now, in fairness, in Temasek and GIC and other funds, whether it's Malaysia, except for Indonesia, it is government run. All right, so that's I don't want to be so biased to say that's a problem. No, there are funds that have done it well with that, there are funds with not. But in the end, when you're starting new, how you start is critical to how you will end.
What about at least in monitoring how it's doing and how it's making decisions? Transparency provisions, you see enough there for us to be able to at least take part in monitoring?
Okay, there's transparency provisions, of which there's sufficient, and there's implementation of it. And part of the job is also us, citizens and media. Are we going to say, we make a lot of noise before it gets approved? Once it's approved, or let's go on to the next issue.
Let's move on to something else.
It's also up to you whether we as a citizenship and media are going to continue to monitor this. Because let me, as I said, I don't like talking about personalities and I don't like being partisan. Is this potentially very good? Yes. Is it potentially very bad? Yes. What will it be?
Yeah.
O sige, best case scenario. Because they're also framing it to have short-term benefits. Tama ba yun?
I don't
Given
think so.
the nature of this fund?
No, I don't think so, because the short-term benefit is some projects may get funded, but that's funded. I mean, doesn't mean the project is already profitable or good. So, I was giving a speech once, and somebody said, "What should we do in the short term?" And I said, "Stop thinking short term," because we keep thinking unless it's an emergency. You should think, look at China.
Okay.
They have a 30-year plan, which they monitor the results every 5 years. Now you wonder why they got to where they got? Because they didn't think short term.
Sasabihin nila kasi their officials can sit there for 30 years.
Whatever.
Lifetime na nga.
No, I'm going to tell you something. Okay, I'll tell you one more thing. Even if we have term limits, why in Thailand, every time there's so many upheavals, but the economy continues?
They have a king.
No, beyond that. They have a civil service which is empowered and has security of tenure. So you can have all the noise, all the coups, everything, but the day-to-day government through the civil service keeps running.
Hala, bagsak na tayo.
I want to go back to the original point. Diba? We asked, is this still a sovereign wealth fund or is it now a completed development fund? You said, actually, I see shades of both.
Siguro
Diba?
hybrid.
But is there, between a sovereign wealth fund and a development fund, if you're seeing both sides, is there something inherently conflicted or at the very least confusing for the mandate of this fund? Is there some? What is it? And
Okay,
what
a
are the
national
embed-
development fund is only looking at helping the Philippines while making money doing it. A sovereign fund, why do you call it sovereign? Because you're using the money here to look for things outside. That's what the sovereign fund does.
So if you're the manager, which master do you serve?
As I said in the last show, and I've been saying, I want a national development fund. If all you want to do is invest abroad, the SSS and GSIS and everybody can do it.
doing
it.
And
doing
they
it.
can invest in the funds of the people who run it well.
Hindi, kaya nga, so-
based on the resource, it's unnecessary.
Kaya nga, so on the scenario that this is the TOR that I'm handing to the first manager, does the first manager know what's the first thing he should do?
Well, it depends who he is and what the board tells him. So the problem, I said, is it's supposed to be a national development fund based on the title and the declaration of policy. But when you read section 14,
It's still a sovereign
I can do
fund.
what I want. See, subject to strict compliance with the investment and risk management guideline. What is the guideline? Not stated. The board of directors may engage in the following. What is it? Everything. Everywhere. All at once. Seriously. It's really everything, everywhere, all at once. But it's supposed to be, oy, dapat dito lang, ha?
Okay,
Now, so how can it's now, it's passed, it's signed, so it's up to the board and the management to say, while I have the authority to do this, I will only do that.
But given the law, nothing will actually stop the management
Well,
from
okay,
doing
if I was an irritating lawyer, which I used to be 40 years ago, okay, I no longer practice, but if I was an irritating lawyer in true Filipino legal tradition, I can say we have two contradictory provisions. How do we reconcile it? Now, the easier way is for someone just to say, we will follow the declaration of policy, as I said, and when it comes to the money before we invest it, I'll just put it in liquid debt instruments in the country. That's what I would do. Then there's no more question. Until I make the infrastructure investments or the direct investments, I'll keep the money in the country in liquid investments.
But if that hinges on the management and on the leadership, then you still run the risk of none of that ever being sustainable. That
Yes.
it's still going
But
to be
that's how the
lurching
law
from-
was passed. That's why I said sometimes.
Haste makes waste. That's what they said.
Well, sometimes it does, but, well, okay. It's not, I don't think it's going to happen, but you could have remedial legislation to clarify ambiguities. You do that. A lot of times you have passed a law, you find out in practice we should change it a bit. Nobody's going to stop anybody from, I mean, not nobody's going to stop anybody, but theoretically, it would be nice if, okay, everybody, President Marcos got what he wanted, the country could get something very good for it, but all these issues other people raise, are they legitimate? If they are, then why not? You can always have remedial legislation.
But in the
Or the board can say, we are enunciating this as our guidelines. Because what did it say? Subject to investment and risk management guidelines. So if we could invey on the board and the manager say, now let's come up with the guidelines. The guidelines is it will only be in Philippine infrastructure investments. It will be, that will have a minimum expected return of this. And in the meantime, even though Section 14 allows me to do all of this, I will limit myself to liquid debt instruments or Philippine government securities while waiting to utilize the money.
Okay.
I could also be nice and say, the BSP can recommend to the president this and this and that. The president can voluntarily say, I will listen to the BSP Monetary Board because it's also important not to hamstring the BSP from its major function. Nothing can stop everybody from saying that, and that will assuage a lot of concerns because at least, okay, I want to say, you cannot have the law cover every eventuality. There's human behavior. As I said, if all we had to do is rely on the law, there would be no crimes. But there's still murder, there's still theft, there's still, why? Even though there's a law, because there's still human behavior.
Well, neither being nice, never being an alarmist, always a realist. Stephen
try.
Konying. Maraming salamat.
Thank you. It's an
Thank you, sir.
honor to be on board and
Thank you.
happy to meet all of you in person.
Okay. Hanggat sa muli po.
Okay.
And that is it for the Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alapay.
We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. I'm Ami Pamintuan.
I'm Ed Linga. We are One News, all sides, all the time.